Greetings, friends and fellow rebels. Welcome to the woods. I had a conversation with someone recently, and they made a remark that perhaps we should bring bullying back into schools so that people can develop a sense of emotional resiliency. And let's look at past generations and how much more strength they had and fortitude and adaptability because they were faced with these kind of problems at a young age. I have an issue with that. My experience, the stories I hear from my parents about how if you were a man in particular, you needed to learn how to defend yourself from a young age. You couldn't walk down the street without the potential of someone wanting to fight you, at least in the socio-economic culture that my parents lived in, which was middle to lower. You had to learn to defend yourself from a very young age, or you'd be in trouble. And that was normal. Now, my much older siblings, their experience was when you were younger, you were accosted at school. Young people could get away with things that older people couldn't. So if you were an older person and you weren't part of the upper strata and you committed violence or aggression, you hurt someone, physically hurt someone, that got you into trouble. But if you were a young person, under 18, and you did something like that, well, boys will be boys, and sometimes girls too. So when you were in a social setting at school, you would wind up being physically accosted, and it was expected that you would defend yourself, and someone might be, talked to about that, and maybe, or maybe not, because boys will be boys. But there was an expectation that for the younger set, you took your life in your hands if you went out into public. In my generation, the fights weren't as savage. There was still a feeling we all knew that there were a few people in each class who were the kind of people who could take a life. And we all knew that as children, we could do that and we wouldn't face the same ramifications as we would once we became adults. So children could get away with things that adults couldn't, and they knew it. And so there was a certain amount of danger that you face as a child that you would have a venue to save yourself if you were an adult. A child could go up and slap or hit another child, and the adults would just ignore it, or they might comfort the child that had been damaged or hurt, but it wasn't considered that's just normal child behavior. It wasn't until the next generation and the generation after that adults became a little more intentional and serious about that kind of thing. And I believe that if you want to really educate someone, you can't combine education with physical assault. And I don't care if it comes from another student or a teacher or someone outside of the school, family member, doesn't matter. Physically damaging another person, assaulting another person for a random reason where you're just walking down the street, or maybe you've hurt someone's feelings by something you've said, and they come back at you with physical violence. No. If it happens, the other person should answer for it, the same as if they were an adult. And if the child is too young to reason, the adult needs to intervene on that and teach empathy in the only way that it can be taught. Or should I say, teach sympathy, teach compassion. I think if we want a truly enlightened population, we need to do that. And I brought that up with my friend, and I was informed that my idea of bullying was outdated, that students don't get away with hitting each other anymore. Physical assault, that's not what bullying is. That would be considered physical assault. So I asked them, well, then what is bullying? If it's not when someone hits you, when someone strikes you, comes at you, throws something at you, or trips you, or shoves you, and with the intention to harm, loses control of their emotions and strikes out physically at another person. If that's not bullying, then what is? And they said, well, that's assault. Bullying is when you say something that upsets another person. Now, in my day and my predecessors, you can't have an opinion about anything without upsetting somebody. Deliberately saying something to hurt someone else's feelings, you can hurt somebody's feelings, but you haven't hurt them. Not really. They're in control of that. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Yes, that teaches emotional resiliency. People need to be able to be exposed to thoughts and ideas and even insults without taking it personally. And really, in the end, what you learn about that situation is the person who says the ugly things, the person who's insulting and cruel, they're the ones who are embarrassing themselves. The ones who are mean, they're the ones who should be embarrassed. They're the ones who look bad. They're the idiots. Not the person who's bearing up under the insult or knows the technique of humor, self-deprecating, or turning the slur around. There's all sorts of ways to do that, but if you can laugh at yourself, you've really diffused the other person. And you can't learn the maturity of that, you can't learn the technique of that if you're never exposed to it. If that's what's considered bullying, then yeah, we need to allow free speech to come back, even if that means people's feelings are going to be hurt, because feelings will be hurt. That will happen. That's part of what the changes in life bring to us. We do need to know how to navigate that. But when it crosses over into unwarranted in particular, but when it crosses over into physical abuse, I draw the line. That's what I consider bullying. I'm sorry that the need to evolve how we allow children to treat each other has passed the station and gone down the line and spun out of control into policies that are actually hurting people, because it's true, you're not getting the same emotional resiliency now that we could see with prior generations. And the more that our young people pull back from social interactions and into the world that's been created for them by the electronics who are their closest companions, the more problems that we're going to see with people communicating with each other and working with the world. We need to reverse that. We do. But let's not bring up the kind of world, let's not bring back the kind of world where intelligent people had to buckle under and face abuse after abuse after abuse. There are so many intelligent, creative, inventive, powerful, powerhouse people who were piled on and destroyed by the treatment they received early in life. We need to give those people a chance to make a meaningful contribution to our world, to bring on what's coming next, the beauty and the wonder of it. So let's keep bullying out of our schools, but let's let people learn how to communicate with each other freely, how to overcome insults, and how to be the best, most powerful possible human. And let's let them learn that from a young age. A controversial opinion, I suppose, but welcome to the woods.